I just bring Dr. Stoffels right up with me because we can just jump right in. I actually had a weird experience after getting my genome sequenced in childbirth to kind of bring two of those stories together. So I had my genome sequenced as a healthy person just for, a story to see kind of what it was like and whether I could use the results. And it turned out that I had a one thing, factor V Leiden, just one copy of the mutation, which means that my blood clots a little bit faster, I guess, than other people's. Okay. And so I shared this information with my doctors. I didn't mean to tell you guys the story. It just reminded me during the introduction, and it kind of leads into what I want to talk with Dr. Stoffels about. And after I had the baby, they put me on a blood thinner. And I just kept saying, why am I on this blood thinner? I don't have a clotting disorder. And so they made me take it for 2 days, and I kept questioning it, and the doctors kept being like, well, are you refusing your medicine? It was a very sort of weird thing, and I'm like, well, I just want to make sure you guys understand the genetics and that this is really what I'm supposed to be doing. And then finally they decided I didn't need to take it. And I talked to my geneticist afterwards, Dr. Green at Harvard, Robert Green, who seems to sequence all of the journalists who get their genomes sequenced. And he was like, this is a problem that you got this blood thinner, and it doesn't necessarily indicate that we are using this genetic information correctly. When you have your genome sequenced as a healthy person, doctors don't always know exactly what to do with that information. He said this could lead to problems with people bleeding, because they got unnecessary treatment. And so that leads me into the first question I want to ask Dr. Stoffels, who I don't think needs any introduction. He's the Chief Scientific Officer of Johnson & Johnson, which had a research budget last year of $10.8 billion. Is that what you spent on research?
Yes, we spent 10.8 on research, yes.
So that's more than a quarter of what the NIH spends every year, about $39 billion. So you have quite a lot of power in terms of your research-making decisions. You've been at J&J for a long time, but you started your career as a physician in Africa, focused on HIV and tropical diseases research, so an incredible wealth of experience and knowledge that you bring to this role. So I wanted to talk about what you see as idealized medical treatment. In a perfect world, what does my experience look like when I go in to have a baby? What does everybody's experience look like with the healthcare system?
Well, idealized is healthy longevity, is how can we prevent and treat as many possible ailments of diseases as early as possible, either prevent, intercept, or make sure that when we find them, we treat them and we cure. I think if you look at the past 20 or past 100 years, then we have been able to get rid of many diseases in the world, through vaccines, TB, through antibiotics. It's not under control everywhere in the world, but if we were here in 1930, TB would be the topic of the meeting because big problems, many people, many families would have. But those diseases are now all gone because we have good drugs, high blood pressure, most of us, elderly people and myself, we are an anti-cholesterol medicine, so you prevent, over time we have been able to prevent a lot of diseases and make sure that they don't cause significant challenges. That is the ideal way for me to how treat. Simple healthcare system, access to everybody, so that everybody can benefit from the healthcare system, but at the same time not wait until we have late stage cancers and then can't treat and can't cure people anymore. So more early stage determination of risk, more early diagnosis, better targeted therapies so that the right people get the right therapies, prevention if possible with vaccines, if not with treatments, and make sure people have a healthy, long life. Mm-hmm.
Well, so that's easy.
It's not easy, but it's a goal and it's a vision and a mission. Yeah.
Where would you say we are, in terms of reaching that? If that's 10, where are we?
Well, it depends where you are in the world, but let's say right in the middle. We have gone a long way already. We have a lot of platforms which we can use now. If you go 100 years back, diagnostic drugs were not there. Today we have a lot of diagnostics. We can treat a lot, we can prevent a lot. But the most complicated and challenging diseases are still need to be tackled. If you look at dementia, if you look at depression, if you look at many of the cancers, if you look at a lot of orphan diseases, while a lot of platforms are there to early diagnose, treat, or cure, a lot of work is still needed to get done. And we are in an incredible time at the moment with new discoveries in the last several years. If you look at immunotherapy for cancer, changed the way cancer can be treated. If you now look at CAR T cells, the cell therapy, the first indications that you can use cells directed to cancer with spectacular results. So it are all these first gene therapies where now we can introduce or we can treat genetic, so these platforms are there. But like always with platforms, and that's the benefit of being 30 years in pharmaceuticals, we started with small molecules, we became very good at it, making very good medicines. It took us 20, 30, 40 years to get there. Then we got to antibodies and protein medicines. Again, 10, 20, 30 years, and now they're widely available in many different diseases. Cell therapy, we are at the beginning, gene therapy, we are at the beginning. And once the platforms are established, the experience is there, the safety and efficacy, you know how to use the tools to direct them to biology. At that moment, they become fully functional in large-scale healthcare implementation. And that's still, we are only at the beginning of the most breakthrough platforms at the moment.
Do you see those timelines shortening with new technologies?
Yes, I see them shortening because of a lot of different things. We have now access to data, and I think the access to data where we learn about what works, what doesn't work, to electronic medical records, faster clinical trials, virtual clinical trials. We have so much access to data now that learning about how platforms behave in people or drugs behave in people, we know much faster. Artificial intelligence to have much more insights, combine diagnostics, molecular diagnostics, clinical outcomes, and all the different permutations on a large scale gives us much more information. So we can decide faster. We can also, not to forget, the regulatory authorities have changed quite significantly. With the number of breakthrough designations now, if you get really material innovations, I think at J&J we had more than 10 breakthrough designations. You see the speed which you can develop new medicines is accelerating. So more and more new drugs will become faster, new platforms become faster to accessible because of all these information, insights, regulatory pathways, accelerated clinical trials, and fast experimentation.
I want to ask you about data. Companies like Regeneron and Amgen, they've partnered or acquired companies that are doing vast amounts of genomic sequencing, pairing that information then with electronic medical records and other information. Is J&J tapping into genetic data in a similar way? Where do you get your data? Yeah,
big time. And I go back to my own experience where I was a significant part of the HIV medicine discovery and development, but I started with a data company. I had with Verco, we sequenced 600,000 patients, and that information, we phenotyped 120,000, we combined it with clinical data and learned from that how to get to the best new medicines for patients faster. And that learning if we now do every therapeutic area of every disease area in our organization uses the collaboration on data with different organizations to determine biomarkers, early detection, response parameters. All that is part of our is a second nature. It's part of who we are and what we do. We have a lot of collaborations, but we never bought a big company or never acquired a big company. But for safety today, we have access to de-identified data of more than 1 billion people in the world.
A billion?
A billion, yes.
How do you have access to that? Through all of these different partnerships?
You do different partnerships, academic, there are coalitions on that. So today, to learn about safety of your medicines in the world, you go through, of course, the direct reporting to you from patients, physicians, from hospitals, but more important now is access through data systems, and they're all de-identified. So we don't know who they are, but we can see if one of our medicines has a side effect, we can, through our data partnerships, can find that very quickly. And that also helps to identify activity of medicines. We do a lot where we do data access to learn outcomes in the real world from medicines. So data have become a critical platform in every company who wants to be successful.
And you mentioned AI. How intelligent is it right now? How helpful is it, and how are you using it?
Well, AI needs a lot of data to be trained in order to be able to make to do the decision making. So it's let's say the early days of being really relevant, but especially at this moment in discovery sciences, where a massive amount of data are being generated, it's absolutely helpful to go through the better molecules, the better targets, it starts to be integrated as part of a data management or a data access almost everywhere. To real practical clinical implementations, the most advanced there are in imaging world, in radiology, CT scans, in anatomopathology. There AI is now routinely practical. In medicine, it starts to become part of the world. Yes.
Let's talk about the successes in personalized medicine and how to translate that into other therapeutic areas. Obviously, cancer has been an area that's just out in front of everything else, it seems like, in tailoring treatments, whether it's using a patient's own cells or just identifying what's driving their disease. Where do you see that progress in other areas like neuroscience, other areas where J&J is operating, and how do you catch it up?
Yeah, we try to learn about in every field, whether it's in psoriasis or in inflammatory bowel disease or in cancer or in infectious diseases. We try to learn everywhere response, non-response. Can we find the parameters which determine that to better target therapies to the right patients? And so recently we brought a new medicine, Balversa, for bladder cancer, which only works if you have a specific EGFR, it's a EGFR, targeted EGFR medicine, but if you have a specific mutation, yeah, and more we go to combining specific diagnostics with drugs. In mental health, what are the parameters? And there are different types of markers predicting whether people will respond yes or no in depression. You know? And that is more from the data side. Other is more biological. The first field, let me go back to my background on HIV. We, in very early stage, did resistance testing, viral load, and combination of therapy. Almost every patient had their individualized therapy. And because the patient demanded it and fought for it, it was very fast. And so it evolved very fast. If you now look in oncology, it's going in the same direction. The molecular diagnostics will be able to determine which drugs are good for you as a patient. Response rates will be able to be measured very quickly. And adaptation of therapy will go, and every patient will become a single patient type of trial. Yeah, it's not a trial, it's implementation. So while initially it's difficult to get done, and it are lab developed tests, and before they are PMAs and can get onto a large scale into all of the laboratories, it takes time because these tests needs to be developed. But as they show their clinical benefit, they will become part of mainstream. Who would have thought that today genetic testing for XDR and MDR-TB is now available all over Africa, all over Asia, in most of the laboratories to determine which medicines need to be given for TB. And that is a result of all this technology development resulting in a simple assay which can be done in the field with molecular diagnostics to be able to determine what therapy people have to have. Mm-hmm.
Tell us about how you decide what to focus on in terms of developing new medicines. I assume obviously you follow the science, but also, you know, there are some areas you've been working on for so long, HIV vaccine being one of them. It takes a really long time to develop things like that. And it's not always the thing that you'd say makes the most sense if you're driven completely by the capital markets, which sometimes it seems like pharma pipelines are. That doesn't necessarily jive.
No, you're probably going to be surprised from my answer, but it's mostly driven by the passion of the scientists and the people in our organization. You know? So, and the availability of new scientific platforms. We are, as a large company, I see ourselves as the connector between good new science and applicable science and specific diseases we can solve. But you need to have very dedicated teams who have insight and know-how for many, many years. You don't do a market study and say today, hey, we are going to, because the capital markets like it, we are going to shift our focus. That's not how this works. It are teams who have 5, 10, 15 years of experience and a passion in a certain area, who know the entire field, who can decide that science, if we use it, will come out in 5 to 10 years with the best medicine. Pharmaceutical development is more about insight in the future on what you can do with this science than learning today on what you can do with the science, because the world is evolving. If you look at multiple myeloma, and we work in that field for 15 years, now we have CAR-Ts, which probably will change that field. How are we going to make the next generation medicine 5 years from now, which is better than what we see now coming into the market? And that only works with very passionate scientists, physicians. That's one, the availability of good science. And of course, you need a problem to be solved. Yeah? So you have the law of the maximal achievable benefit in a certain disease with a certain platform. And the pharmaceutical world follows first generation, second generation, third generation. Typically you can get to better medicines, but then you achieve the maximal what you can do in that disease. Look at very simple example, hepatitis C. Yeah? If you can cure with one pill in 3 months hepatitis C, that's solved. Yeah? What are we going to do? You go to somewhere else. Yeah? Okay, now hepatitis B, or you put your people on other areas. So you have to, at a certain point, switch. But it's always driven by the passion and the know-how of our people, availability of good science, and a good, important problem to be solved. Yeah? Years of life, quality of life. You have to be able to measure the benefit, first in years of life, of quality of life, before you make a business plan. Yeah? That is the most important metric. Can you change life, years, and quality? And if you can do that, you can start calculating, is it worth investing in it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah? So then once you've made that decision and you have to figure out the business plan, how would you assess the business plans right now for personalized treatments, CAR-T, and gene therapy in particular?
Yeah, I think financial, the way we do the business is organized today, or the healthcare system is organized today, should not be an inhibitor to get to new breakthroughs. If today with CAR-T you do one administration and the patient will benefit for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, we have to solve it different than saying that's not fitting our business model. We have to find a business model where we can bring that in. And we all lease our cars, yeah, or have our mortgages on a house. So you could pay for diseases also over many years, even if it is one time administered. The only thing we have to do there is start working on a business model which can accommodate that type of therapies. So you have to, today we do CAR-Ts, we are working in gene therapy, and the financial models behind it, don't worry us, we'll solve that, or we'll solve that with the payers in the healthcare system. We have to, because otherwise it stifles innovation and we won't go anywhere. And that's, don't put the financial models and the business models of today first before you invest. Make breakthroughs and adapt the business models so that they can accommodate the new technologies.
So what you're seeing so far in terms of the CAR-Ts that are on the market, the few gene therapies that have been introduced, is it working? Or do you think that you're going to have to change it as more are introduced?
It will be need to be adapted. The one-time very high payments are very challenging for a healthcare system, or very challenging for society. We have to find better solutions for that. Yeah, and as it will become much more. At the moment, it's one-off here, one-off there in an orphan diseases, but it will become much more regular now that maybe 5, 6, 7, up to 10 of these therapies come into the market every year. So we'll have to change the way we think about that. And industry has the role to work with the payers, work with society to find these different models. Yeah.
I want to ask you about the tension between the way the public sees the industry and what you're describing as you're driven by the passion and the ingenuity of the people who work for you. So people go to work in this industry every day thinking they're doing great work. They're doing some of the most important work there is. It's harder than rocket science. But the public, in a recent Gallup poll, said they hated pharma more than they hate the federal government. The least popular industry in the country. Yeah. J&J is dealing with some specific problems, the talc powder and the disagreements with the FDA over finding asbestos in one bottle, the opioid crisis where J&J is offering a settlement of $4 billion. How do you just go to work and kind of grapple with that tension of how the public sees you and the importance of the work that you're doing for society?
Well, I'm there, and I can tell you that the motivation within our organization at the moment for solving the next big problem is incredible. Yeah? The motivation for people to be part, as human beings, to be part on changing the future of healthcare, whether it is with an HIV vaccine, or we are now introducing a new Ebola vaccine, or new TB drug, or new cancer, or a new CAR-T. It's such a magnificent space that it doesn't impact the way we think about the future. We have to deal with the way we are perceived outside, but the way we partner with biotechs, with academia, inside our organization, with diagnostic companies, we are the driving force of changing the future of healthcare by the way we bring you, by the science. The early science, we are the translators into real application for humans. I agree. We'll have to do better on how we are perceived, but it's not going to change the way we think about science, and the way my teams in the organization, as scientists and physicians, will continue to work. And you've seen that in several of the meetings you had with some of them. So. It's a problem on the pricing of medicines that the public perceives as very high, and they actually probably are. The investments we do are, like you say, 10.8 billion in investment in R&D every year. That is quite substantial. There are very few industries who can do that, and it's because we are innovative. We bring innovative drugs, which we bring into the market value-based, because almost everywhere in the world, the value proposition we make, we negotiate and talk with the payers. It can be perceived as high, but if we calculate outcomes-based measures, then almost all the time now, it is in a determination in the discussion with the authorities. And that we'll have to do better, but I think we will get there.
Have you, you've been in this industry for a long time, have you felt like it's changed the public's perception of the space? It's always been a tense relationship, but is it worse now?
Yeah, it always has been tense relationship. Having been in the industry for 30 years, in the first days of HIV, we had the same debate. The first days of hepatitis C, you have again the debate. Bringing new innovation at a high cost is where many people need it, is always been the red flag on hitting us. Yeah, but in the meantime, if you look at what we have contributed to HIV, to life expectancy, today, when I started in Africa, life expectancy was 6 months there, 2 years here. Today, life expectancy is normal, or maximum -2 years, 30, 40, 50 years of life expectancy, because the research of all of our companies have done and the combinations we bring to patients. So. And it's now with tiered pricing available for $70 to $100 HIV. People are treated in the middle of Congo, middle of Africa. Everyone is treated. 30 million people now get therapy. So you can't deny the contribution of what industries like us do. And of course, the way we have to create our business model. Typically 10 years of even shorter after approval, we lose our patents. We have to recover our costs and the benefits within the 5 to 10 years after the launch of a product. And that's how our business model works. Yeah?
Well, sometimes, I mean, oftentimes companies find ways of extending their patent protection for many, many years past that point.
Yeah. But very often time we also lose it, much earlier, or we fail a drug which we have invested a few billion in, and it hits a safety, and we have to take it from the market. So we have the positives and the negatives in that space, and many drugs only are short-lived because the next generation medicine is coming much faster than you expected, and you benefit 2-3 years, and then it's gone. It's not the first time it happened to us too, that we have a medicine which only exists for 3 years in the market because the next generation is there. More and more, by the way, is happening because innovation is going so fast.
It's going faster. I mean, that's good news for folks, but it makes your business models more difficult.
Even more difficult, yes.
Hepatitis C was a fascinating, I think, market study of that phenomenon, probably.
It was a fascinating, fast. Once we could culture hepatitis C and could screen, everyone and their brother-in-law could make an hepatitis C drug. So it was very, very fast. And at a certain point, you had like probably 100 new hepatitis C medicines somewhere in the market. And in the end, 2 or 3 made it because it was much more simple in the end than everyone expected. And that gave a very fast turnaround of the market, and ultimately a few remaining players with relatively low price for a cure now. So the market works there.
Well, so when you mentioned everybody and their brother or sister being able to make something, that makes me think of immuno-oncology. How would you assess that marketplace and how many different shots on goal there are following similar targets?
Well, immuno-oncology has been a breakthrough for cancer, and many companies will develop one because you have to have it as part of your combinations. And so it's all about how can you get to combination therapy. And so many companies have one in development to be able to use their own in combinations, because the combinations are going, if you have to pay for all of the different combinations, it's going to be very expensive, first in development, but also ultimately in the market. And that's why you will see a lot of, and I think it's good that a lot of immunotherapies are developed, because like in hepatitis C and in other fields, it will bring prices down over time and much broader available, and many more combinations will emerge. So I think it's a good thing. And there is also a market mechanism that once it doesn't give any return anymore, it will stop. So you have to give up. So the market mechanisms work there.
As you look out into the world and look at potential partnerships in academia or in small biotechs, how much exciting science that is different from the pack are you finding there, especially in the immuno-oncology space?
I can't particularly answer in the immuno-oncology space. Very broadly, if you look at what we learned in CAR-T and different type of is massive. And that if you learn now or see now what is happening in China, the number of CAR-T companies which have emerged, also here, many academic centers were able to do that. So it's going to evolve very fast. The future of that, in the end, it will have to get to a number of platforms which emerge from that, because you can't have 100 platforms in CAR-T hanging out in a hospital. You have to, will have to, either with industry or in collaboration, will have to come to how is that becoming more routine. But CAR-T, in my opinion, is also a very important proof of concept. which will lead to new type of cells, which leads to new type of future cell lines, which will be much easier and probably off the shelf to have the same effect as you have today with CAR-T. So it's a proof of concept. It will work. Many patients will benefit from, but very quickly will evolve into next generation. And that is the good thing about all these discoveries, that they will transform cancer. They have such a good benefit that the attraction to invest in it is very high, and the next platforms will emerge very quickly. And all of us will benefit from that.
I think we'll get to talk about this a little bit more on our next panel, so I'll just ask you one last question before we then shift. And Dr. Stoffels, we'll be sticking around and we'll be taking questions in the next one, I think, so you'll get to ask Dr. Stoffels questions. But you mentioned you're driven by the science and the passion of the people who work for you. What are you most passionate about? I know it's hard to choose. Tell us about one really exciting project you have going on right now.
What I'm most passionate about, well, I'm an infectious disease person, so if I would have my dream realized is have a vaccine for HIV. Because of the still tremendous impact on health in the world. If you go outside of the US and Europe, but even within in our countries, the long-term pathology of HIV, especially in the developing world, is still an exceptional negative contribution to the future of these countries. Having people taking 50 years their pills, it's a challenge, and we have to get to different solutions. And that is, a 30-year-long passion from my time in Africa, treating patients in hospitals, to where we are now, being able to treat them very well, but the challenge of treating 30, 50, 40, 50 million people for the next 40 years is a huge challenge. And so we have to stop the transmission of the virus, and so that over the next 50 to 100 years, the disease can get out of the world. And that's only possible with the vaccine. So
how far away do you think you are?
Well, we are 2 years away from the outcome of our clinical trial, but that doesn't mean that we will get to a result. But we learn, definitely. Every experiment you do, you always learn. And you learn from the successes, you learn from the failures. And that's almost in every space, that you have to learn from the failures, don't give up, continue to go to the next step, and incorporate the learnings and go forward. And that's what we do.
All right. Dr. Stoffels, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I think we stay up here now.
Yeah.